Hey there, listeners, and welcome to Project Zero, where we hear about the journeys of some of the best project leaders in the game. My name is Alex Tuck, and I am the host. I'm here with my good friend, program manager, and consultant, Cathy Matosky. Welcome to the podcast, Cathy.
Thanks, Alex. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about your Project Zero. Cathy, start us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
So, I am currently a strategic program manager for a digital advertising company, but I also have a company on the side where we focus on operational excellence. And I get to focus on some of the things I don't get to do in my day to day, like change management and working with leaders and organizational design and kind of the full spectrum of the program management space.
Cool. That's awesome. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that today.
Yeah.
So take us back though, Cathy. Like, it had to start somewhere. Like, how did you get into project management to begin with?
Oh, I was thinking about that, Alex, and it seems like it's a kind of not a straight journey, which I bet a lot of people, that's how a lot of people answer you. So it's funny, I actually started off with a degree in medical technology. So I worked in a blood bank and I kind of knew that wasn't exactly the direction that I wanted to go in for the rest of my life. And I wanted to get into healthcare IT. And so when I did that, I started off in implementation and held a variety of different roles. But those roles kind of are what introduced me to project management because I knew through trial and error, that's what I really needed to do to be successful in those roles. So I didn't do it right all the time, but I got the idea that we needed to kind of understand what we needed to do and when we needed to do it. And that evolved over time to where I actually had a role that had the word project manager in it. And I was responsible for managing those projects from, inception to the end. So
Oh,
that was kind of my journey. So I don't know if I picked it or it picked me, but that's the way it seemed to work out.
interesting. Where were you at? Were you at IDX before? I'm trying to
I
remember.
started off at IDX.
Uh-huh.
I did and held some other positions with various different companies. But yeah, started off there, which became GE.
Awesome. Cool. And you have your PMP now. When did you get that? When did you decide to take that leap on the project management side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was told project management position I held was in the marketing space. So I was responsible for helping manage product launches, but also what we used to call the downstream marketing, which was where we would prepare for conferences and things like that. And it was at that time where I was really beginning to hear about the PMP, and some people I knew were actually, going and getting their licenses. So I decided that was the route that I wanted to take. And I took the various classes that I needed to have and then sat for that certification, which is, several years ago now. But I am glad that I did that. It gives you a different perspective because it shows lots of different ways in which you can project manage, which isn't necessarily the way that you might choose to do it. And this is a while ago now, but that's why I chose to sit for the certification.
Interesting. Cool. And then I know you're an awesome change manager because I've seen you in action. Are you ProSide certified as well? And like, when
I'm
did you decide to do that?
Yeah, I am ProSci certified. So after I got out of healthcare IT for, many reasons that people do, I started to just a different journey based on the time of my life. I decided to go out on my own and do some contracting and I was project managing. And it was at that time that some of the projects didn't go exactly the way that I hoped that they did. And when I did a retrospective, I really realized it was because I wasn't focusing on the people side as much as I should have. It was much more rote and, having the list of things you needed to do, which to step back, I learned is not what project management is about, right? It's actually managing the people to get things done. And so that made me want to focus a little bit more on the change management side. So that's why I got ProSci certified. But I also decided to get my master's at that time too in organizational psychology and organizational development. So I think it's interesting the way that your career can go with project management, depending on how you want to focus, but that's why I decided to kind of spend some little bit more time on that change management side.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. It's something that is underappreciated in the project management space for sure.
Mhm.
Everyone talks about change management and they almost talk about it transactionally, right? It's like, oh, make sure it gets out in the change log, right? But like, and I don't want to downplay like what the PMI talks about too with change management. They do talk about like the management of people and bringing people along, but I just think it's so underappreciated, and the fact that we need a separate ProSci certification versus change management being part of project management is sort of crazy to me. So,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think in the last several years, with AI coming on, that everything is just moving so much faster. I would actually argue that every program manager or project manager needs to have that skill set because if you can't move your people along and really understand the impact that they're going through and how sometimes why your projects aren't moving along successfully, why you're seeing that resistance, it's really hard to get to the end point and make that project successful. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think anyone that's interested in this profession should kind of look at both of those areas so that they can meld them into that one thing.
for sure. I mean, even if folks don't do, like, the full pro side training and certification route,
Yeah.
I've just seen, like, project managers that do invest some time in the change management and the relationship management work. They just they do leaps and bounds over the other project managers that are very focused on, like, more of the technical execution of projects because you really need both,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It used to be, and I think PMI defines a project, right, as having a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same. I mean, yeah, yes, of course it should be, but doesn't it feel like so much more cyclical now than
Yeah.
it used to? And there's never that endpoint. And so that's why I think it's so critical to bring that people side in it. And, as the world talks about AI, that's the one thing, right? That's a people thing that you need to develop that skill on. That isn't necessarily that routine rote thing that you can kind of lean on AI for.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, just like from a pure branding perspective, like with our company, it's really important to focus on a single thing. And so, like, we have focused on project management, but like the truth is, there's aside from like project management, program management, portfolio management, all of that stuff, there is just this like what you're describing the cyclical nature of things. And so, like, when you roll out and go live with a particular project, like a piece of software, then you have to operationalize it. But even within that operations piece, there's like mini projects, mini cycles along the way. And so we've
Yeah.
gotten a lot more involved on that side too, almost as like a secondary conversation just to make it less confusing because it is confusing right now how, it's all iterative now.
It is really iterative, and then if I think back when I used to think a project was successful is when it was completed, so if it was an implementation and you checked it off the box,
Yeah.
and now, I think we both know it's not that, it's actually adoption and using the system and being clear about what the success was and making sure that we're actually meeting the success, so I do think that's changed a lot in the last few years as people really realize that that's what makes a project successful, not completing it, but actually getting the benefit from the
Oh, yeah.
whatever project that might be.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a good segue. Would love to hear about your Project Zero. And so, just for the listeners, Project Zero is that first project where you figured out how to be a project manager. It may have been successful, it may not have been, right? But it's a place where you learned, where something clicked and you figured out, oh, wow, like I was just like checking the boxes. And now, like, I understand what it is to drive a project. So, tell us about what that was for you, Kathy.
Yeah. I think the one that comes to mind is when I was in the product world and we were managing these large scale releases, product releases, and a lot of times they were released at a users conference.
Hmm.
So that particular project was one that I was leading, and that was the first one where I felt it was like Project Zero because we got everything done on time for the conference. And so we were able to, release the product, have those conversations, and it was checking off all the boxes, but we met a deadline. So that felt pretty successful to me. I would say, though, that I had projects after that where I didn't do that. And even though we were checking the boxes off, we didn't maybe do it quite the right way. And so then over time, I've had revelations and multiple project zeros. And as projects get more complicated, I think you also start figuring out the things that you need to do differently than what you did before. And I think we use the word agile in project management as a methodology. But for me, it's about really understanding that every project is different. You have to use a different approach. That's where the people side comes in, is understanding what that team is and what they need from you in order to make that project successful. So I think I've had multiple project zeros, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Interesting. And so, was there like a project management team? Like, did you have mentors there in that first engagement, or were you just like Googling and making stuff up?
I was Googling and making stuff up. I used an Excel spreadsheet and we had, the dates written across the top. There was no Gantt charts, but I had a great team, which is so often what helps us makes us successful. And that was at the beginning of understanding that you really needed to track all those and trying to figure out how to get people to meet those deadlines that you is have imposed. Because we all know being a project manager doesn't mean you're actually have the teams reporting to you. So you have to figure out the best way to get things done with your knowledge and influence.
Yeah, cool. Was there anything that sort of tripped you all up during that process that you sort of recovered from, or was it really one of those flawless projects?
I don't think there is a flawless project. I think that that was a while ago now. There was definitely things I'm sure that tripped me up, like not meeting a deadline or having something complete that wasn't as expected. Or I remember one time, Alex, I was responsible for helping to get a project point put together. And at the time, it was did I say project point, PowerPoint put together. And it was for the leaders. They were actually using that PowerPoint and we practiced it and we had it all down pat. And they went up to do the presentation and the automations didn't work. And they just were looking at us like, What didn't you practice this? Didn't you do that?" And we had. That's just life, right? Some things just fall apart in that moment. So that was then that same project. So it
Oh my
didn't
god.
go as planned, but we made it in the end.
That's so fun. Yeah, when you have those hard and fast deadlines that you have to meet, if a conference is coming up and you're gonna release at the conference, like, I can't imagine being like HubSpot and having the in-town
Right.
conference and, like, you have, I don't know, whatever, 80,000 people showing up
Yeah.
and, like, having to release all these things. I can't imagine how many, like, all-nighters people are pulling before those conferences, so
Yeah, yeah. And that's a great example of that's super different than doing a system implementation, right? Where you have deadlines because there's other contracts that are expiring, but it's just more public facing. So every project is so different with how you need to meet those deadlines.
yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Awesome. That's a pretty fun Project Zero. I've heard
Yeah.
some disasters too. Like we've had, honestly, like mine was sort of a semi disaster because it was very political. It was the Health Connect, but they're all different. Right? Like we all figure out
Yeah.
different things. And to your point, I'm still learning today. Like I'm like, wow, like this is different with AI now, like, today, it's just there's expectations about cost being lower and things going faster, and frankly, AI just isn't there yet, right? And so you have to learn new ways to engage people, and so we have agents now that we're engaging with too, right? And so it's like, how
Yeah.
do you take the information from these agents and translate it for humans and stuff? It's crazy, real.
Yeah. And because things are moving so fast now, I think, it's different than it was 10 years ago, right? To manage a project, there's
Yep.
a lot more expectations to get things done more quickly. And then as soon as you do, there's like another thing that has to be done. So I think you're always learning something new because the world is just also changing around you. But yeah, absolutely with AI, it's a pretty helpful tool, I think, for project managers, but there's also resistance to it too. So
Yeah, so on the subject of AI, what do you think do you think it's gonna have a huge impact on project management over the next few years? Or, like, what are the big things that you see AI changing for project managers?
yeah, I do. I mean, I see it now. I'm sure that we all as project managers use it to help us with our templates, our status reports, our communication, and the note takers we have that help so much better capture all those action items. So it's certainly a time saver there. But I also think I was sat in on a webinar a few weeks ago that actually ProSci gave, but it was talking about how AI is just so different than any other system implementation or because it used to be you would go into your workplace and that's where the change was happening or that's where the project was happening. Now we have AI and it's on our phones, it's with us, and we all have different exposure to it. So, because of that, we're all in different places with using it and accepting it and figuring out how it can actually be our partner. And that all leads to how I think it will impact project management because, talking about that change again, it's embracing how to use it and how to make it beneficial, not just for project management, but for the project that you're actually trying to implement.
Yep. Yeah, it's so crazy. Like, yesterday, we were at the Vermont nonprofit or yeah, the Vermont Nonprofit Summit, and we hosted a session on it was a promptathon and session on AI, and we were blowing people's minds, like, with what was possible, and these are just,
Yeah.
like I mean, I would say, like, our maturity level is pretty high, but what we kept telling people is this looks magical to you, but it still makes so many mistakes too. So it's like really
Yeah.
important to figure out, when to bring a human in and like when it should replace a certain task and you can trust it and when it shouldn't replace a task and trust it. It's so interesting what's possible. So
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I'm working on a current project and working with our learning and development leader, and we've talked a lot about, critical thinking, right? So you
mhm,
have to make sure that when you're implementing anything that has AI, you're not only teaching them the tool, but you're teaching them to be thoughtful about what you're putting into the tool, and then thinking about being thoughtful about the outcomes so
yeah,
that you're actually using it to your point and making sure there's not mistakes, that you're adding to it and not using it as I read this great book by Jeff Wood that I don't know if you follow him at all years ago, a couple of years ago, actually. And it really helped me to understand to use it as a partner and not a leader. And I think that's the biggest, takeaway for me was that you can't, it's don't trust it 100%, but use it as as a partner to help you move forward with your tasks.
interesting. I have not followed him, so I just added that to my search bar, and I'm gonna do that for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. God, we could talk about AI all day, but would love to take it back to project management specifically. Like, I ask this to everyone, like what do you think the number one skill is that good project managers have, and why do you think that's the most important?
I think the number one skill is active listening, like really listening and understanding what it is that people are trying to achieve. And along with that, maybe equally important is curiosity so that you're asking the right questions. So when you have those two skills, you're able to really understand what the project's deliverables, tasks, milestones, all of that needs to be so that you are taking what is complex and trying to make it as simple as possible for everybody and understanding how they need to receive that information and how they need to achieve their own success. So I think those two skills for me have proven to be important.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are great ones. Active listening, actually, I think that's the first time anyone's actually mentioned that skill, but
Ah,
it's so almost everyone defaults to communication, which is an easy answer, right? But the active listening, like that specific part of the communication cycle, like that's huge. That's so important. Yeah. Honestly, we don't listen to each other at all anyway.
well, I mean, one of the things, if anyone was interested in pursuing this career, is I did take a couple courses in coaching. I decided not to get certified in it, but those are great ways to really understand what active listening really means and how, to your point, a lot of the times we are not actively listening. We're thinking about 10 other different things that we need to do. So when you recognize that, you can pull yourself back in to that phase of listening. So there's lots of things you can do, I think, as a PM to kind of hone those skills. And so that's one of those areas.
For sure. Hosting a podcast is like one of the places where
Or
like
another way to yeah,
you
exactly.
cannot not pay attention because I could ask people questions, but like if I'm not actually asking them questions about the stuff they just talked about, it's very not interesting at all. And so like
Right.
I've already felt myself just like really focusing, and then it makes me think like, oh wow, I don't do this when I'm on with my team, or even if I'm in like a sales call or something, I'm like zoning out or like messaging someone or doing something else, even though I should be like completely focused on that conversation. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, well, I think we all fall victim to that,
yeah,
that's for sure.
yeah. All, trying to achieve more with less time
Yeah,
and not doing anything
yeah,
well. So,
yeah.
what advice would you give? And this could be about, like getting into project management or just like general career advice, right? Like what advice would you give for folks that are earlier in their career that are trying to figure out like how to progress and how to move forward and how to think about the next 30 years of work?
I think that there's so much out there for education now that there didn't used to be. It's so available with whether it's a podcast or a webinar or a course. I think those are some things you can do to really help give yourself that growth mindset and expand some of the learnings you have because sometimes it's hard. If you only know one way of doing things and you don't necessarily have mentors, you're going to do the best you can with that one way. So I would say expand your horizons as much as you can and try to surround yourself, have a mentor, pick a mentor if you can, even if it's not within in your own company or sphere. Like I've been so fortunate to have had great partners like yourself and wonderful managers, and I have a wonderful friend that's in the same space where you can just talk about this stuff, and then much like we just talked about with the podcast, it expands your horizons so you can learn new things, But I would also add, you can just do different things. You might be surprised what you can do with this career that you hadn't thought of before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. What do you think are, like, common misconceptions that people have about project management that maybe you had earlier in your career or, like, maybe even people still have today?
I think the biggest misconception is sometimes one, I don't need a project manager because I
Mhm.
can do this myself. And it's somebody who's also trying to do lots of different things at the same time. I think the other misconception is that it's really just a list of things that you need to do. And if you have that list and you're, clear on who needs to do it and that's all you really need to do project management. So again, why do I necessarily need that person? So I think understanding what it means to move tasks along and all of the follow-up and communications and discussions and things that need to happen. I think that's the biggest miscommunication
Yeah, that
in
makes
my
sense.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What have you found? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes that I yeah, not needing a project manager is we hear it all the time. And frankly, honestly, with AI, I tell my team this. I don't know if it's true, but like I see a world where maybe a project manager doesn't have the role or doesn't have the title of project manager, but it's someone has the responsibility of project management, but like they're supported with a lot of technology and things like that. And so their only job is to be the human, right? Like to really motivate the team and make sure that communication's happening and stuff like that. So I could see that happening. Might not be called a project manager anymore
Yeah.
necessarily because actual technical work of making sure that something starts and ends might not be as important. But for now, it's crazy pants to try to run anything without like someone having the responsibility of project management.
Yeah. Or what if it doesn't start? Or what
Yeah.
if it never ends?
Yeah. That's exactly oh my god.
It's all the gray area in between.
It was funny. I was in a strategic planning session yesterday at that nonprofit conference, and we were talking about challenges at some of our nonprofits, and this person shared that she's like, "Well, we've been freshening up our strategic plan for the past 15 months, and we still have not completed it, and everyone's burnt out." And I'm like, "Oh my god, talk about something that needs to start and end. That needs to be as quick as possible."
Right. Yeah, right. And so yeah, yes,
It's
absolutely.
funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah. So you talked a little bit about like how you used to think about success as just like, closing the thing out. But what do you really like, what do you think like, if you had a checklist of what success looked like in a project, like, what would you say at the beginning of a project, like, the definition of success would be?
I think it's different per project. I really do. I think in some cases, the definition of success might be that there's a new way of working that actually, saves employees time. And I think if that's the case, you really need to have a metric. I'm a big fan of having metrics so you actually can track whether you're successful or whether it's, adoption, like how many people are actually using the system and what are the benefits that they need to get. So I think the definition of success is different for every single project, but I think it's important that you have a definition for success. I take it a step further too. I think that a lot of time as a project manager, you're handed a project or solution. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be like in the HR space, it could be in the technical space, but you're not always part of the conversations where you're trying to understand what the problem is that needs to be solved. So if you can understand what the problem is that needs to be solved, you can better understand how to shepherd that project through to success and have that definition of what success looks like. I'd also throw in just many people have faced this before too, that just because you're in the middle of a project, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to keep going forward if you've decided it's not going to work and it's the wrong thing. I've seen that happen a lot too. You've committed, you're going forward, you're going to make it work, but months ago you knew that it wasn't the right decision. So
Yeah.
I think that can be a definition of success too, is saying we need to stop and reevaluate before we move forward.
Yeah, I love that. I was talking with Jason Lorver yesterday over drinks, and he was talking about he's like, "I just read Grit by Angela Duckworth, and now I'm on to Quit," which is I don't know who wrote Quit, but so it's
Yeah.
basically like the 2 ends of the spectrum, right? Like, where you just push through and get things done, and then there's this concept of actually just quitting can be like a good thing. And as a society, we sort of stigmatize it, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just interesting the point about quitting a project, like before, like the best time to quit a project is at the very beginning, right? Before it even gets started. So
Right, right. Yes. And so if you have those success factors, it's easier to know whether you're trending to success so that you can make that decision.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was great. Thank you so much, Kathy. Like, how can people get in
You.
contact with you?
I'd love it if people would reach out on LinkedIn. I'd love
Awesome.
connections.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing your insights and your stories, Kathy. It was really great. Such a fun conversation.
Thanks, Alex. It was really fun to have a little retrospective with you. Much
Yeah.
appreciated.
Cool. Awesome. All right. And thanks to all of you who have joined us today for Project Zero. Be sure to subscribe to Project Zero wherever you get your podcasts, and we will catch you next time with another great project leader story. Thanks again, Kathy.